Hi, patrons. You probably don't remember me because it's been a hot minute since we've done anything like this. We used to do Q&As pretty regularly, actually. I think I probably just got really busy and maybe even like a little burnt out on like the whole video editing thing. Um, but I do love answering your questions, and I think it's such a great way for us to sort of interact in a way that's beyond just I draw art and hopefully you enjoy the art. Because naturally, I'm sure you guys wonder how I do certain things, why I do certain things, who I am as a person, stuff like that. So this is kind of a good format for that, which is why I'm bringing it back now. I'm gonna try and keep the scale a little bit more manageable though. So you guys asked a bunch of awesome questions. A couple weeks ago, and I want to answer all of them, but I'm going to restrict myself to just picking two or three each time we do one of these. If I don't answer your question, please just ask it again next time. I will eventually get to all of them. I hope. But just the more time I spend answering questions, it's just exponentially more time editing and just kind of like putting the video together. And I just want to keep it super manageable this time. So with that said, bear with me because again, I haven't done this in a while. So as far as like the audio, the video, I'm kind of trying to remember like the right way to set everything up. Hopefully the audio is coming through just fine. And with that said, let's dive right into some questions, and I will get you some answers, and we'll go from there. So first up, Matt Smith asked, "Have you ever thought about expanding out the different franchises you've created? For example, Starcaster. Have you thought about expanding the universe with different stories, backstories from other characters, prequels, sequels, etc.?" Um, Absolutely, I have. I'll give you some examples. So one kind of sort of example of that I'm actually working on right now is and I mentioned this to patrons like a month or so ago, is analog and D-pad year one. So when we started analog and D-pad, we kind of jumped right into them already being superheroes, and I sprinkled in a little bit of like their backstory through some flashbacks and dialogue and stuff like that. But we still never really got to see those beginning steps for them as superheroes, and I kind of know what happened in my head because I needed to have that foundation, at least in my imagination, to then build everything else off of. But I never really got to show you, and the current continuity doesn't leave very many gaps for that many flashbacks. So what I'm gonna do is do like a whole separate limited series where picking up from like the day after uh, the accident that gives them their superpowers. We're going to go through roughly the first year, very similar to like the idea of like Batman Year One, where uh, all the interesting stuff that happens at the beginning. We're gonna get to see. So that's kind of a way um, to do like a prequel for analog and D-pad. Other things that I have either dabbled with or attempted to brainstorm, or projects that I'd like to do someday. Definitely, there's a few for the Starcaster Chronicles. So I started, and I might still do it, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do it as a standalone book, or I actually even started experimenting with doing a visual novel, which is like they pop up on Steam sometimes. They're basically like kind of like choose your own adventures with like images, and it's like kind of a game. Some of them are more gamey than others. Like I probably wouldn't go super gamey with it because I can't do the programming, but I can do the like the visual novel aspect of it, where like you're reading or listening to dialogue and there's images on the screen and that sort of stuff. So I did start writing a story about a kind of like a bounty hunter assassin for hire character who is not, and this would be not at all related to like Court and the Starcaster. It would just happen to take place within that Starcaster universe, and just kind of do some feature new characters, new locations, and just sort of flesh out the universe in that way a little bit. Um, so hopefully I'll get to that at some point. Also, like I thought it would be neat if I sort of did like a module to turn like like a reference book or something, so that you could take some sort of RPG rule set, like maybe like not Pathfinder. What's their space one? Starfinder, I think. Um, and basically like take that rule set, but then play that within the Starcaster universe. So it'd sort of be like, all the planets, all the creatures, their stats and classes and stuff like that. I thought that would be fun to do. Alternatively, just a straight up board game where you play as a crew within the Starcaster universe. And like, I'm not going to get too into this one because it's very like early brainstorming stages on that. But I kind of pictured, like a cooperative sort of, you're on a ship, sort of like Court and Spec do, where you want to get, like, you're a smuggler and you're trying to get cargo from A to B and B to C and stuff like that. And um, but anyway, so there's definitely a number of places that I would love to expand a little bit, but like everything else for me, unfortunately, it just comes down to time, creative bandwidth in a way. I am unfortunately just the one person, and it's not super easy to outsource things and that sort of stuff. I've had very hit or miss luck with like trusting other people to work to the speed, the quality, whatever that I the standards that I hold myself to. So at the end of the day, it always comes down to me and how much can I fit in, and also, unfortunately, prioritizing, um, you know, what's fulfilling creatively versus what's fulfilling financially, because those two, as much as I hate to say it, those two have to coexist for me, because this is how I support my family. So there are some things that I would love to do, but I have to really consider if investing a whole lot of time into it has the potential to at least see some return, see me get paid for some of that time. Because otherwise, there might be another project that's more, that might be a better use of my time. So all of that stuff has to come into play. But the primary one is pretty much that I already load myself up with, what I do. So carving out time for anything even above and beyond that can be pretty tough. But definitely something that I'm hoping to do and continue to expand some of these universes. All right, next question. Stephen Shook. Stephen, you asked a bunch of rapid fire questions, all in the same post. They were all awesome. I just picked one. What prompted shorts coming back? I assume by shorts you mean the Sillies. What prompted the Sillies to come back? Mostly that I was looking for a little bit something I could give patrons, for their, because you guys keep this whole thing going. Really, I'm not gonna lie to you. The advertising industry has been on fire for the past like year and a half. It's like so different than it used to be, and it's just garbage. And so, honestly, you guys are mostly it for me. So I just wanted to add a little bit more value to the patron. It's one of a few things I'm looking to do. The other one would be, the analog and D-pad year one, adding that to, as a patron thing. But it comes down to, it's always something I wanted to do. It's never something I wanted to stop, but I have to try and find a balance that's maintainable for me. So right now, what I'm trying to do is roughly one per week. Okay, I think I can. So far, I've been, knock on wood or whatever. I've been able to do that, and also kind of like remembering that the point of Sillies was just to be silly. It wasn't to be like, this has to be like the perfect, just to look at something and like, almost like not improv, but like just whatever comes to my mind, whatever makes it chuckle, just whatever, throw it out there. Because the art is super simple. I'm not, the point was not to invest like a whole day in it, but rather to be able to just throw out, silly thoughts, silly ideas, that maybe made me chuckle or whatever, and then move on, with the other stuff. So primarily, it was that I just wanted to, add more to the patron, so that these Q&As coming back, a couple other things I'm kind of working on and brainstorming. That was the primary goal. All right, and finally for this month, Blue Salamander asked, I'm curious about your process. How do you get the dialogue and images to fit in a page, and then the right number of pages for an issue? How do you do all of that and generally land a joke in the last panel of each comic, too? I assume there must be a lot of planning involved, but I'd love to know how you do it. So that's a very interesting question, and it's not one that I'm wholly confident I can answer, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway because it is such an interesting question. Um, so how I approach, how I approach doing that, because you're right. You have a page, and you typically need some sort of like setup and or story, and then you tend to want to end with something amusing, something funny, even if it's not like just a punchline. So how I approach it differs depending on what I'm doing. If I'm doing a one shot, which is like just strictly this page exists on its own, and is and those typically the goal is like I want to put a smile on your face. So if it's a one shot, um, I'm looking at say, let's say, for example, a game, and I'm looking to see like, is there a feature here? Is there something about this game that I find amusing? Like, how do I, what is the thing that I'm building to? It's like, what's the funny thing? And then typically I will try and work backwards from that in a way. So it's like, here's the funny thing, and you almost want that to be a little bit of a surprise at the end. Like, how do I then get there from a place that you're maybe not expecting? So sometimes I work backwards from like what's the funny thing, um, and then, but if I'm doing, for instance, like an analog and D-pad story, then I'm balancing story and the joke. Okay, so for each page, I need to both move the story forward and hopefully have somewhere in there something amusing. Now, that obviously doesn't always happen because some situations, like, you don't want to put in like just a joke at the end, just it just doesn't work. So sometimes you just have to like, I look at it, I'm like, okay, this is not the situation where I'm trying to add a joke, and then it's strictly story. But otherwise, keeping it lighthearted, and I can't always get the funny thing like right at the end. That doesn't always work either. Sometimes it's like, oh, the first panel, Ethan says something in a funny way and it's kind of amusing, but then the conversation progresses to like, okay, well, now we're talking about the real stuff and the seriousness, and that leads on to the next page. So I can't, so you can't always put it right at the end in that sort of and I also kind of feel like maybe you shouldn't always put it right at the end, because then it's expected. Then like, okay, I'm reading the panels and I'm building up to it, and yep, there's the joke. Sometimes um putting it in the middle, putting the funnier bit in the middle, and again, this is only like when you're telling a story, and a bunch of pages are meant to be read uh, one after another. That's how I write stories. I understand that I uh, can only put out so many comics in a week, but when I write them, and my ultimate goal is, see, because a page, when I put it up, it's brand new for one day only, and then it's in the archive forever. And so my ultimate goal is, how does this read for the person a year from now who gets to sit down and read everything within 5 minutes, as opposed to like a month, waiting one page at a time. And so when you're doing that, it's okay to obviously put a joke in the middle, because then they read the rest of the page, boop, they're on to the next page, and there's a joke there somewhere. That doesn't really work with like a one shot, because you don't want to like blow your load in the middle, and then there's just like, dead space afterwards. It kind of, because then it kind of leaves you on the weird. Um, but so it's really just, and then so the other thing I do is, like when I sit down to do a page, I think about what needs to happen on that page. I do all of my dialogue on just a blank white piece of paper, or a screen, whatever. Um, and then so everything that I want to happen, and I am, when I'm doing that, I'm kind of sort of putting them in panels in my head. Um, but so in terms of fitting everything, I just write out all the dialogue, and then I can move the different bits around, and I can say like, well, let's do, you know, for composition's sake, because I want this much dialogue in the panel, it would be better to do a very horizontal one with the characters here, and then I'll move this piece down here. And so in that way, I can sort of carve and design like a flow of the page, so that I don't have, because you never want a ton of like tiny little panels. Um, and that comes down to the pacing too. There's an interesting thing with like pacing in when you're doing comics, is like the size and the number of panels also conveys like the passage of time in a way. So if there's something that's happening like really fast, if you do a bunch of little panels, it seems like stuff's moving like really quickly. Whereas if you just do two big panels, time moves slowly, just by the through art. So that comes down to it as well. But mostly, I try and um, figure out, and I have been doing this for a little bit, so I think at this point I've gotten fairly good at gauging what I can fit onto a page. Like I very rarely come up with an idea and try and write it out and find like, oh, that's actually like 2 pages worth of material. So I usually get it pretty close on the first try. But yeah, I write out all my dialogue, kind of start, shifting, moving things, positioning around. Then I cut my panels, sketch in like who's going to be here, and then I can also, because I have the dialogue already, I can then move that around to sort of figure out. Well, he can't be standing there. Like I need this space for dialogue, so if I rotate the camera like to this position, like I have empty space for the dialogue, and you can still see both characters, stuff like that. So it all comes down, it all comes into play in terms of like constructing a page, and it happens so kind of naturally and organically for me now that like that's why it's weird for me trying to answer this, because I don't tend to think about it this specifically anymore. It's just sort of like a process that I go through. Like it's almost like asking a musician, how you wrote a song. It's like I feel like all of these kinds of things, you just sort of find your way to it and through it. And so it's similar for me. But that's I mean, those are some of the things that if I were to think about it very specifically, um, that spring to mind as far as like you know considerations that go into how do I get an idea and build it into like a very structured format, which is what a comic page is. It's very structured. You have hard lines, panels, all that kind of stuff. So um, that's just it's practice, like everything else. It's experience, and it's just sort of experimenting a lot of the time too. So uh, yeah. All right, and that is going to be it for this video. You can see why I'm trying to limit the number of questions I do. I tend to get a little bit long-winded about certain ones. Maybe I talk too much. I don't know. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, if your question didn't get answered, it's not because I didn't want to answer your question. It's just because I'm trying to keep things reasonable for myself. And I will do another post next month. So feel free to just ask the same questions. If it hasn't been asked, or if it hasn't been answered, just post it again. Like you're not like, don't worry about that you're going to annoy me or whatever. Just keep putting it in front of me. Like I said, I'm just going to pick some randomly, answer them, and hopefully this will be a thing that we all enjoy doing. All right, thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you for your questions, and I hope you guys have a great day.